Why do people always say that marriage is hard? The first year of marriage is the hardest. This was probably true when people didn't live together before marriage. Do you have kids? Michelle Obama said she hated Barack for like 10 years when the kids were small. That is a super common pattern. Not married, but with my current, so we try hard to find things to do together, learning each other's hobbies, etc. I think most marriages fail because people get bored and stop attempting new things. You get into a rhythm, go to work, come home, cook dinner, go to bed, and maybe have the odd date night. It's the days where you go, let's paint for a little, or something that matter. You ever been laid off? Either of you want to change careers even though it would be a strain on the household? Do one of you take a more active role in raising the kids? You both healthy? No long-term illness or disabilities? Either of you ever have to leave home for work? On a long enough timeline, life happens. These are just some of the things that strain a marriage. Over 20 years I've learned that marriage is more than love. It sometimes requires work to maintain happiness for everyone involved. It's not so much that they marry the wrong people as it is that they grow in different ways and find the old assumptions on which the relationship was founded no longer fit. Maybe you and your wife have grown in the same directions. That's great for you, but it's not the general case. Doing anything for 60 years is hard. A lot of people don't know themselves. I know this sounds so deep-s, but it's also true. This is especially true if you've had a traumatizing childhood or multiple bad experiences. Couple that with many couples having gotten married in their early adult years, and they haven't even begun to figure themselves out before hopping into a marriage. People don't often like to reflect deeply on themselves and their emotions. It's hard to face one's own flaws, but so easy to see someone else's. Mental issues can make this even more difficult. And a lot of people don't want to face that they may have something going on up there like ADHD or bipolar. If you don't know yourself, how can you expect to show up authentically in a relationship? You can't. And so people often feel like they are drowning, and it strains the marriage as each person in the relationship grows and learns about themselves. I had almost no idea who the fuck I was in my early 20s. I did more growing between the ages of 21-25 than I did between 25-30. I would have made an absolutely terrible wife in those early years. Some people grow in different directions, which could be detrimental to the relationship. And likewise, if you have kids, this is a whole new phase in the relationship that can go one of many ways. One fight in 6 years could be a sign of perfect agreement in all areas, or maybe a symptom of something else. It's hard to say. Some people need a challenge and can get bored in a similar situation. My brother was married for a similar amount of time and never fought, and they got divorced because they fell out of love. I've been married for 13 years, 3 kids. We argue at least once a month. We have grown together and apart in many ways, but I think we are still going strong. That's why marriage is hard. It can be going well and then just fall apart. One might have a drop in hormones and lose their sex drive. One might become more religious than the other. One might start picking up bad habits after kids. Life events can fuck things up. End of the day, life is hard, so by default so are relationships. Oftentimes, it's the outside influences that make it hard too. Not impossible, but it takes work. Things like jobs, in-laws, kids, money, other obligations, it all takes communication. Most likely you're both just level-headed people who are not quick to anger. Think about how many people are hot-headed or get flustered easily. Now consider how rare it would be to have 2 level-headed people match up as life partners. The odds are against that happening the majority of the time. My marriage is also not hard, but for other people it is hard. And they might have married the wrong person, or they might just be the type of person who finds relationships hard. It isn't hard for people who love and communicate with each other. It is hard for people who let resentments build up and can't solve problems or communicate. 26 years for me, communication is number 1. That's where I see most animosity come from. For us, rock, paper, scissors is what we use. If you both don't want to do something, best of 3. No arguments, just sarcastic comments and/or gloating. Doing it in public is always fun, get some weird looks. All meaningful relationships are hard because we're all complicated individuals. You don't mention kids at all. For us, that's when marriage got hard. It continues to be hard at times. To answer your question, it's hard because it's very easy to slip out of love in a marriage. After a while, juggling all the things adults have to juggle, it is easy to start to see your partner as a roommate or business partner rather than love of your life. You need to constantly work at being a couple and loving each other, even if it has always been easy to do that. There will come a time when it isn't. The hard part is the work that gets you back to that point. Marriage is not hard until it suddenly is, and when it is tested, that is when you find out how committed the other person is to it. Most people will say communication is key, and it is, but it is entirely possible for one side of the marriage to refuse to communicate an issue until it is too late, and there can be many reasons for why that is. If one side stops trying though, then it will likely be the hardest thing you ever have to try and deal with. Congrats, you're a unicorn. You also might not know her true feelings on your marriage and relationship. Imagine this. You fall in love with the most beautiful person in the world, you have everything in common. You are young and full of expectations and goals. You get married and everything is perfect. 20 years pass, and you have 3 kids. Now your life is way more complicated. You both have changed a lot, and in different ways. The hard part about being married is always expected because over long periods of time people do change. Some more than others, some in directions unknown. There is risk, and that is hard. Source: married once over 20 years. Still happily married, but our happiness is completely different from our happiness in our 20s. It's hard. I married the right person. But people change as they age. She did and I did. It gets sticky when one of you wants another child, but the other doesn't. When one person wants a bigger house, the other wants a smaller house. When one of you wants more income, the other wants more work-life balance. Hard having somebody whose goals are going to align with yours for 50 years. Any kids yet? That when it really gets hard.